Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to dive right into a seriously fascinating source text today. It takes ancient biblical theology and ties it directly to the literal geological and atmospheric chaos we see on our planet right now. It's wild, right? It frames natural disasters not just as, random science stuff, but as actual physical symptoms of a deep spiritual history. Let's get into it. To give you a quick roadmap of where we're headed, we'll start with the root of Earth's suffering, and then move through creation, sin, and the fall. From there, we'll look at fallen angels and the flood, followed by Babel and the divided earth. Finally, we'll break down the anatomy of natural disasters before wrapping everything up with a message of hope. All right, let's kick things off with part 1, the root of Earth's suffering. The source text we're looking at frames the whole state of our physical world through a pretty profound theological lens. It opens up by throwing a really provocative question our way right off the bat. Are planetary disasters just coincidental, or are they the result of human decisions? The argument here is that the literal groaning of our planet, the extreme weather, the shifting Earth, it isn't random at all. Instead, the author posits that these events are tied directly to human free will and, the pervasive presence of sin throughout history. And honestly, there's a striking metaphor in the text that really hits the nail on the head. The author writes, "Please do not get too distracted by the plant above the ground and neglect to consider the root causes of the surface disasters." Basically, they're urging us to look way past the surface-level physical damage of things like tornadoes or earthquakes and instead examine what they call the underlying spiritual infection. It's asking us to totally rethink how we watch the evening weather report, looking for the spiritual root rather than just the physical plant, so to speak. Moving right along to section 2, creation, sin, and fall. Now, what's super fascinating here is the time frame we're operating within. The Bible doesn't actually state an exact age for the planet, but by adding up all the lifespans and genealogies found in Genesis, kind of like what Archbishop James Ussher did back in the 17th century, the source estimates the Earth is roughly 6,000 to 10,000 years old. This young Earth creationist view is absolutely crucial for understanding the incredibly rapid sequence of geological changes the text describes next. Looking at how the text maps this out, there's a huge rapid escalation. According to the source, the Earth transitioned from a totally stable, placid environment in Genesis 1, where God saw everything was very good, to a literal cursed landscape. This massive shift happened in Genesis 3, when Adam, Eve, and Satan introduced sin. From there, the timeline tracks a steep descent into absolute planetary chaos, hitting major world-altering tipping points in Genesis 7 with the flood and Genesis 11 with the Tower of Babel. Which brings us to section 3, fallen angels and the flood. So, what exactly triggered a global reset of that magnitude? Well, the source points to a really shocking event in Genesis 6 involving the sons of God. Now, theologians have 3 main views on who these beings actually were. They were either fallen angels, powerful human rulers, or the godly descendants of Seth. But the text emphasizes that whatever went down here, it was so perverse, it literally required God to wipe the slate clean with a global catastrophe. The really crucial point is how the source interprets this event. It firmly, absolutely backs that first view. It argues that ordinary human marriages, which is what views 2 and 3 suggest, just don't explain the birth of giants or the sheer devastating harshness of God's judgment. Instead, the text asserts that fallen angels literally took physical form to pervert God's created order. They mated with human women to create demonic half-breeds. And according to the source, the flood was designed specifically to erase this chronically sinful human race and those unnatural beings from the face of the earth. Okay, so how did this actually happen? The text lays out the mechanics of the flood, and it turns out the floodwaters didn't just come from the sky. There were 3 distinct, incredibly violent sources. First, the springs of the great deep broke open. Second, the floodgates of the heavens released. And third, the source posits that this was literally the first ever rainfall on Earth. The argument is that the placid, pre-flood water cycle didn't even need rain. For 150 days, these forces radically and violently reshaped the entire surface of the planet. To explain what breaking the springs of the Great Deep actually looked like, the source references a catastrophic plate tectonics model. Get this, it suggests that at the onset of the flood, the ocean floor rapidly heated up and lifted a staggering 6,500 feet. That is a massive upward thrust that spilled seawater and volcanic steam directly onto the land. So we're not just talking about a heavy rainstorm here, it was a total geological rupture. Let's move to Section 4, Babel and the Divided Earth. Now, you'd think humanity would have learned its lesson after the flood, right? Well, moving forward about 100 to 340 years, the text identifies a second major geological turning point tied to human rebellion. On the plain of Shinar in ancient Mesopotamia, Nimrod's kingdom decided to build a massive tower to the heavens, the Tower of Babel. The source equates this direct act of narcissistic pride to Eve's original temptation in the garden. It was a blatant attempt to usurp God and transcend human limitations.
But here is where it gets really wild. We always hear that God judged Babel by confusing languages and scattering people, but the source takes that a massive step further. It argues that this divine judgment didn't just scatter people, it literally fractured a single, original supercontinent into the 7 moving continents we live on today. This forced dispersion didn't just create new cultures. The text asserts it permanently destroyed the Earth's original climatic harmony, setting the stage for all the turbulent weather we experience now.
And that perfectly sets up Section 5, Anatomy of Natural Disasters. So now we're diagnosing the physical symptoms of this fractured post-Babel planet, starting right beneath the surface. The source defines a volcano as an opening in the Earth's crust, allowing magma, ash, and gases to escape, and categorizes them as active, dormant, or extinct. But the really crucial detail here is that most volcanoes form near tectonic plate boundaries. And those are the exact same plates that the text argues were violently fractured during the catastrophic events of the flood and Babel. It's like the Earth's crust is literally scarred from these biblical cataclysms. And it doesn't stop there. When those fractured tectonic plates shift underwater, we get tsunamis. The text defines these as giant ocean waves caused by underwater earthquakes or volcanoes that move through deep water as fast as jet planes. Literally jet planes. And when they hit shallow coastal areas, they slow down and build up into these terrifying walls of destruction. Again, the source views these not as random geological hiccups, but as the incredibly dangerous reality of a permanently unsettled planet. Now, if we look up at the atmosphere, the text highlights the sheer chaos of the skies and clears up a pretty common point of confusion: hurricanes versus typhoons. It turns out they are the exact same intense tropical storm, both requiring wind speeds of at least 74 miles per hour. The only difference is geography. If it forms over the North Atlantic or Northeast Pacific, it's a hurricane. Northwest Pacific, it's a typhoon. For the author, both are just glaring symptoms of that climatic disharmony born way back on the plain of Shinar. We also see these violent temperature extremes resulting in tornadoes. The source explains a tornado simply as warm air and cold air fighting in the sky. This clash creates a violently spinning funnel of air stretching from a storm cloud to the ground, with winds that can actually reach up to 300 miles per hour. It's an atmospheric battle that the text firmly views as a direct symptom of a planetary environment that is totally permanently out of balance. To round out this anatomy of disasters, the source outlines the massive extremes of our modern water cycle. On one hand, we've got devastating floods, from rapid flash floods caused by storm surges all the way to river and coastal flooding. But then on the flip side, we have crippling droughts. The text breaks these down into meteorological, agricultural, hydrological, and socioeconomic droughts. These droughts wither crops, crack the soil, and act as the primary fuel for massive global wildfires. It's just a relentless cycle of extremes. Which brings us to our final part, Section 6, a final message of hope. So after laying out this pretty relentless history of human sin, continental division, and planetary disaster, where does the source actually leave us? Well, despite describing a suffering, groaning planet being assaulted by the actions of a fallen humanity, the text definitely doesn't end in despair. It concludes with a firm theological assurance, stating, "There is hope in Jesus Christ, just hang on until the end." For the author, understanding the chaotic state of the physical earth is really meant to reinforce the urgency and necessity of spiritual salvation. As we wrap up today's explainer, the source leaves us with one final, incredibly provocative thought to ponder. Could the physical chaos of our planet, the earthquakes, the typhoons, the shifting tectonic plates, truly be a reflection of humanity's moral history? Whether you buy into this framework or not, it's absolutely a fascinating lens that entirely reimagines our relationship with the Earth and the very ground beneath our feet. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive today, and keep seeking to understand the world around you.